In the third part of this Blender 3D logo tutorial, we're going to add some particle effects to our logo animation. So I'm going to open up the file that we started, or we finished last, which was the version 2. And I'm just going to go into 3D view here. And in the last update that we did, we changed the color of or we added a material to the logo itself. We added this light source as well, and we added some reflections to the floor. So we can just render this out and just check it again quickly. And this is what we have so far, and we want to add some particle effects. When this logo gets finally animated, it's going to probably, I'm not sure how we're going to animate it, we'll work that out a bit later, but more than likely it's going to sort of come in from the top of the screen and hit the floor. And when it hits the floor, we want some particle effects to fly out as if it's hitting the floor. So we can go ahead and do the particle effects now. So I'm just going to press escape to go back into 3D view, and I'm going to press 5 to go, well, we're already in orthographic, so if you're not in orthographic you need to press 5, and I'm going to press number 1 to go into the front view, and we're going to go ahead and press Shift A on the keyboard to add. We can also add from down here, but we're going to press Shift A and we're going to add a cylinder just like this, and we're going to press S on the keyboard to scale our cylinder down. So we want to scale it down to about this sort of size, and we want to rotate that cylinder as well, so we're going to rotate it on the Y axis so that it's sitting sideways 90 degrees. So let's just make sure you set your Y rotation to 90, so it's sitting sideways. And then we want to scale it on the Z axis so that it's the same, just maybe slightly larger, or roughly the same width as this tutorial text or whatever text you've entered in there. And you can scale it here using the Z axis here on the scale. So the next thing we want to do is go into the right side view, so we're going to press number 3 key on our keyboard, and that will take us into the right side view. We can see our cylinder here, and we're just going to move the cylinder up for the moment. We can just drag it pretty much anywhere, it doesn't really matter too much. Somewhere like here will do, just away from the other objects so we can edit it. And we want to use the mouse wheel to zoom in, and we can hold down the Shift key and the middle mouse button to pan. So we just need to get a bit closer into this cylinder because we want to edit it, do some editing to this cylinder. So the next thing we want to do is go into wireframe mode here, and we want to go into edit mode, and these little dots are the vertices that make up the shape of this cylinder, you can call it. We want to edit these vertices, we want to delete pretty much half of this cylinder. So we're going to press the letter A on the keyboard, and that will unselect everything, and we're going to press the letter B on the keyboard to use the box select tool, and we're going to box select this section here, including this middle one here and here. And then we're going to press D on the keyboard to delete, and we're going to delete all of the edges. So we should be left with something like this, half a cylinder, let's call it. And we can come back out of edit mode, so we'll go back into object mode, and we can go back into wireframe, materials here. And if we press number 5 on our keyboard, we'll come out of orthographic view, and we need to zoom out a bit, and we can just rotate around, and we can see we've got half a cylinder now, just like this. It's actually sitting behind the logo, so we want to have it sitting in front of the logo. So let's just reposition it. So we'll press number 5 again to go into orthographic, and then number 3 to go into right side view, and we want to move this cylinder so that it sits just in front of the logo, just about here somewhere. We can even bring it down a bit and say just about here would do. So let's press number 5 again to go back into perspective view, and we can use our middle mouse button to rotate around the object so we can see it in front of the logo. Let's zoom out a little bit. And what we want to do now is just make sure the cylinder is selected. It's already selected here, but just click on it just to make sure you've selected the cylinder. And we need to stretch this box out a little bit. This right side panel here, we need to stretch it out to the left, so we can just move it to the left, and we need to get to the particle system here. So we're going to click on the particle system, and we're going to create a new particle system, and we're going to change some of these settings. The number here, this is the number of particles that are emitted from this object. So this little green line here is the timeline, and you can see that the emission starts on 1 and it finishes on 200. So this is 1 here, and this is going to be 200 frames just here. That's when it's going to stop emitting the particles, and right now it's emitting 1000, and we want to reduce that down to around, let's say, 450, something like this. So let's shrink that number down to around 450. You can have a few more, a few less, it doesn't really matter too much. And the next thing we want to do, we'll come back and edit these settings, but I think for now let's set the start time to 10. So we're going to shift this to 10, and we'll set our end time also to 10 for now. So it's going to start and finish literally on the same frame. Let's just do that a bit quicker. So we set these to 10. We're going to put our randoms all the way to the top, and we'll leave our lifetime all the way to the top. So we set that to let's set that to around 100 as well. Okay, so let's remove even distribution. We want this to be a bit more random, and we'll leave jittering on, and let's increase the jitter amount slightly to around 1.4, roughly around 1.4, and we need to also set the emitter geometry. We want to set that to around 0.25. And we can reduce this down to -1 as well. So we set these settings like this. You can play around with these settings. After we've done this, we're going to see what the particles look like. You can play around with these settings to, you know, make the particle however you want it to display and work. So in here we're going to set it to a fluid, and we're going to set our size to about 0.19 or 0.2, let's say, and we want to reduce the mass. We want it to be a lightweight object, so we're going to reduce the mass all the way down, and the random size we're going to increase. We'll set this forces option to around, let's set it to around 1 for now, and we'll see how everything looks once we've finished. We'll leave the drag and the dampening off, and pretty much this should be okay. We're going to set all of these elements to 0, and we're going to increase the shift to around 1.7, and the rest level will increase that to 2. These other options should be fine. Now in the render section, we want to set it as rendering an object, and we need to create something that is going to use as a particle, because at the moment we don't have anything suitable to use as a particle, so we're going to create that now. And we'll set the rotation on, and we'll set the size, we can leave that around 2, and the random we'll leave at 1. So down here you can see these little boxes, and these represent layers, and we're going to click on the second layer. In fact, we should just go to File, Save As. We should really save this as version 3. Make sure you save it as version 3. So if we don't like anything, we'll have our version 2 to go back to. And you can see this little yellow dot, so that represents there's some objects in that particular layer. So if I click on this little yellow dot here, right here, you'll see all of our work that we've done so far. But if I click on this one next to it, this is like a new layer, so there's nothing inside of this layer at the moment. And we want to create an object in here that we're going to use in our particle system. So what we'll do is we'll press, let's press number 1 to go into front view, and then press number 5 to go into orthographic. Let's do that again. So we're going to go into front view, orthographic, number 5 and number 1, and we're going to press Shift A, and we're going to insert let's insert a UV sphere. In fact, no, let's insert, let's use a UV sphere. Or maybe in fact, let's delete this. What we do is we'll insert let's insert a cube. And the reason why this is looking black because there's no light in the scene at the moment. So there's no lighting source, so this is why it's looking like a black object at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll go to our materials, and we'll add this orange material to the object at the moment. And let's press number 2 on the keyboard so we can see the right side view. Sorry, number 3 to get into the right side view, and press number 5 to go into orthographic. And let's add a light source, Shift A, and we'll just add for now, where are we? Lamps. Let's just add a sun lamp, and we'll drag this up. So I want to go into front view and press number 1. And I'm going to click on the object, and let's just see what we're going to do to this object. Let's have a quick look. Let's add a modifier to the object. So we're going to click on this tool here. This is the modify tool, and we will add a subdivide surface to it. So we just clicked on this tool here. Let's just undo that. Let's just get rid of this. So we've got a square object at the moment, just a simple square, and we're going to go to the modify tool here. It's a little spanner sort of shape, and we're going to add a subdivision surface. And this will give us more edges. It will just give us more edges to this shape. And we can see how that's looking at the moment. And this will become our particle. So here, with this selected, we can see it's called a cube at the moment. So let's double click on this cube and let's call it a particle. And and we're going to go into front view, so press number 1, and I think we need to reduce the size slightly, so let's press S to scale. Let's just scale it down a bit. So roughly this sort of size. We may increase that or decrease it, we'll see. So with that job done on this second layer, we're going to move back to the first layer where our logo is, and we're going to go to click on the particle, this cylinder that we created. So this is actually the particle emitter itself, and we're going to go to the particle system here, and we're going to scroll down, and in the object here, in this option here, we need to select particle. Under the display section, let's just check what we want to do here, if we need to do anything. I think this is all okay. It should all be fine as it is. And one other thing we need to do, underneath this render section, we need to untick the emitter. We don't want to render this actual bar, we just want that to be the emitter itself, but we don't want to render it in our scene. So with this green line here, we need to right click on it and drag it across, and we can see particles flying out now in all sort of different directions, and they're probably a bit too large. So we can reduce the size here. Using this option here, we can reduce the size of the particle. And it's set to random, so they're randomly different sized. So we press F12 on the keyboard, we can see all these little bubbles flying out, and they're going to fly out towards the camera in all different directions. But there's a couple of other things we need to do. We want to stop the bubbles from sinking through the floor, let's say. We want them to bounce off of the floor. So we can do that. So we'll just press escape, and we're going to click on the floor, the plane, right here. You can see the plane here. And we're going to go to physics here, and we're going to set it to collision. And this will make the particles, you can see they're all falling through the floor at the moment. Now they won't fall through the floor. Now they're bouncing off of the floor. Here we can see them bouncing. So we can press the play button here. We can see the actual objects flying around. And when it gets to the end, it will start from the beginning again. And that looks pretty good. I think the only other thing we want to do is to get the particles to bounce off of this text as well. But to do this, we need to select the text, and we need to go to Object and convert it to a mesh, because the text itself can't, we won't be able to add it to a collision detection, so we need to convert it to a mesh. Just note one thing: if you convert this text into a mesh, you can't edit the text anymore afterwards, so you need to make sure your text is correct. It's, in terms of the sizing and the words and the letters and stuff like this, everything's correct in here. Because as soon as you convert it to a mesh, there's no way back really. So convert to mesh, and we convert this one also to a mesh, and we'll click on the first one, and we'll set collision on this one, and we'll click on this second one, and we'll also set collision on here as well. So we can scrub through and we can see, we could take an example. So I'm scrubbing through using the right mouse button. I'm clicking on this green line, I'm dragging it across, and we can take a frame like this, for example, and just render it. Press F12, and you can imagine the text is going to drop in from the top, and when it hits the floor, these bubbles are going to explode from it, from the bottom of the text. So that's kind of the idea of what I'm trying to achieve on this animation sequence. So in this part of the tutorial, we created a cylinder, and we chopped the cylinder in half. The reason why we chopped the cylinder in half is because we didn't want any particles to be emitted from the bottom of the cylinder, only the rounded edge of the cylinder. So only the particles only be emitted from around of the edge of this face. That's why we chopped it in half. We also added a particle system, and we changed the settings. So if you click on the particle emitter and go back to these settings here, you can play around with these settings here to see how they affect the particles. If you click the play button here and the particles are running, you can use this last arrow to jump back to the beginning, so you can keep sequencing it and seeing what's going on. And you can just start playing around with the settings to see how these settings affect the particles themselves. That's a nice way to see how these settings may affect the particle being emitted. So do play around with the settings and experiment and see what works for you, but I'm kind of sticking with the settings that I've described because I like the effect. So in the next tutorial, we'll start to animate this text itself and we'll also start working with the camera and moving the camera, giving it some motion. So we may possibly pan around this logo or do something with the camera, and also animate the text itself, and then we'll be closer to finishing off this 3D animated logo. Okay, look forward to seeing you on the next tutorial.